PCOS is being renamed PMOS because it was never really about ovarian cysts. For years, I've treated this as a metabolic and hormonal condition because the cyst part has always been misleading. Some women with PCOS don't have any ovarian cysts, and some women with ovarian cysts don't have PCOS. So this new name does not mean we've suddenly discovered a brand new condition. It means the name is finally catching up with what's been happening all along. PCOS has always been a confusing diagnosis for many women. Some are told they have it because they have irregular cycles, some because of acne, facial hair growth, or high testosterone, and some because they get an ultrasound and they see cysts on the ultrasound. And others are probably told they don't have it because their ultrasound looks normal. And that is part of the problem, because there's not one single diagnostic test for PCOS. There's no one blood test that says yes or no. There's no one scan that says yes, that you have this. It is usually diagnosed from a combination of symptoms, cycle patterns, signs of estrogen excess, and other lab markers, and only sometimes ultrasound findings. And that is why the name has caused so much confusion. When people hear the word polycystic ovarian syndrome, they usually focus on the ovaries, and specifically, they focus on the cysts. But the so-called cysts are not really cysts in the way you think about it. They're usually just small follicles seen on an ultrasound. And while that ovarian appearance can be part of the picture, it's not the whole condition, and not everyone with PCOS will have these follicles. For many women, the most important thing is what is happening hormonally and metabolically. And that is why the new name, PMOS, makes more sense. PMOS stands for Polyendocrine Metabolic Ovarian Syndrome. Quite the mouthful, which is why we'll call it PMOS. But the meaning is important. Polyendocrine means that this condition involves more than one hormone system, not just the ovaries. It can involve insulin, it can involve the androgens like testosterone, and it can involve signals from the brains to the ovaries to make hormones. It can also involve the adrenals and even thyroid function. And it's also how these systems interact with each other. Metabolic means the way your body manages energy. That includes blood sugar, insulin, fat storage, appetite signals, inflammation markers, and how these signals affect your reproductive hormones. And this is where one of the biggest misunderstandings happens. When I ask women sometimes with PCOS, have you had your insulin tested? A lot of people will say yes, but then they show me their fasting glucose or their A1C, and they're not the same thing. And even when insulin is tested, that's another issue. Most labs will show a reference range from 2 to 25. And so you might have an insulin of 15 or 16 and you're in the normal range. But ideally you want to be less than 10 and optimally in that 3 to 8 range. So even if your glucose and HbA1c look fine, you can still be insulin resistant. And that's the difference between looking inside a broad lab reference range and looking at the optimal ranges. Glucose tells us how much sugar is in the blood. Insulin tells us how hard your body is working to keep that glucose under control. So your glucose can look normal while your insulin is already elevated. A simple way to look at this is glucose is the end result and insulin is the effort your body is making to keep that result normal. And that matters in PCOS or PMOS as we're now calling it, because insulin can influence the ovaries to contribute to higher androgen levels, and it can affect ovulation, it can make cycles irregular, it can worsen things like acne, facial hair growth in parts of the body where you don't want it, weight gain and fertility. So when we say this condition is metabolic, we're not just saying about blood sugar, and we're not just saying it's about weight either. Many women with PCOS do struggle with weight, and insulin resistance does make weight loss harder, but not every woman with PCOS is going to be overweight. Lean women can still be insulin resistant. They can still have high androgen levels and they can still have irregular ovulation. And the other symptoms like hair thinning, fertility issues, and abnormal hormone signaling. And this is why testing matters, not because there's one magic PCOS test, but because the right test can help to understand the underlying pattern driving the symptoms. For one woman, insulin resistance may be the main driver. For another, it could be the adrenal hormones. For someone else, it could be inflammation, thyroid function, stress, or even undereating. And for many women, the main issue is androgen excess, even with a normal metabolic picture. The diagnosis or the label can be the same, but the pattern or the underlying cause can be different from person to person. And that's why I don't love the one-size-fits-all treatment plan for PCOS. Because if you only focus on the label, you can miss the underlying cause. And the metabolic side of PCOS is not new. This has been understood for a long time, and many practitioners and researchers have recognized this for years. Insulin resistance, androgen excess, and metabolic dysfunction are central for many women, but the medical language is slow to change. And when a condition has been called polycystic ovarian syndrome for many years, it's easy for cysts and the ovaries to dominate the focus and be the main focus for treatment, which is not going to get to the underlying cause. If the focus is only on ultrasound for cysts, then someone may be told they don't have PCOS because cysts were not seen. And if the focus is only on symptoms, then someone may not get the metabolic testing that helps to understand the underlying driver of their PCOS. The point of PMOS is not to erase the ovarian part. The ovaries still matter. Ovulation still matters, the cycle pattern still matters, and ultrasound can sometimes be useful, but the old emphasis on just polycystic ovaries is not the focus anymore. So how is PCOS, or as we're calling it now, PMOS, usually tested? At the basic level, you're looking at three main areas. First, you want to look at symptoms and cycle patterns. Are your cycles irregular? Is ovulation happening regularly? Are there signs of androgen excess, such as acne, facial hair, hair growth, or loss of scalp hair? Second, are hormone markers like total testosterone, free testosterone, SHBG, LH, and FS ratio, are they out of range? And sometimes looking at other hormones like the adrenals. Third, the metabolic markers. This is where insulin, glucose, A1C, even things like triglyceride levels and inflammation markers can be important to test. Also remember that these labs have an optimal range, but they also have a very broad reference range. So if you're in the reference range, that does not mean you're optimal. Now I'll do a separate video on the best tests for PCOS and PMOS because that's a much more detailed conversation. But for this video, we'll just focus on the fact that PCOS is not diagnosed from a single test or a single scan. And also that the name change to PMOS does not mean that treatment necessarily changes. We still want to focus on regulating cycles, lowering androgen levels, improving things like acne, hair growth, supporting fertility, and improving insulin sensitivity. So many of the same treatment goals are the same as what I've been doing for a long time now. But PMOS changes the starting question. Instead of asking, are there cysts on the ovaries, we should be asking, what is driving this person's hormone and metabolic dysfunction? For some women, it's just focusing on the insulin resistance side of things. For other women, it means supporting their ovulation or addressing the androgen excess. And this can involve nutrition, focusing on sleep, reducing stress, optimizing gut health, assessing thyroid function, looking at other medications that could be contributing. And this is where testing can guide the treatment, because not every woman needs the same approach. The first step is to get a diagnosis with the proper signs and symptoms, a detailed blood test markers, sometimes more advanced markers like the Dutch hormone test. And this is why the new name PMOS matters. It acknowledges the condition was never about cysts and about the interaction between the ovaries, the hormones, insulin metabolism, and ovulation. And for many women, it may explain why the diagnosis has been so confusing or why they haven't had a diagnosis when they suspect PCOS. So the key takeaway is PCOS was named after one feature, but PMOS points us to the underlying cause. And the better we understand the biology behind PMOS, the better we can test, treat, and individualize your treatment plan. In the next video, I'll go deeper into the specific tests I would consider for PMOS and how those results can help guide treatment more precisely. And if you're interested in advanced hormone and adrenal testing, watch this video next where I explain the Dutch hormone test in detail.